Hello and welcome to this session on software servers. So what we are going to understand in this session is what are software servers. So software servers are also basically computer programs, but this kind of computer programs run continuously from the point that we start the program until we explicitly stop the program or for some reason the program gets crashed. So that is the difference between a server program and an ordinary program. While an ordinary program stops as soon as its job is complete, a server program is something like running in an infinite loop and always there present to respond to some kind of client request. A server program can be written in most of the mainstream programming languages like Java or Python or JavaScript, Golang, and can run on almost all operating systems. And the general purpose of the software programs, of the server programs, is that they run continuously and they are there to serve client requests. They are there to serve their respective clients. Okay, but what are the types of software servers? There are many types of software servers, but these are the most important types, while the most important and the widely used type is the web or the HTTP server. So whenever we access any static website via our browser, it is that we are actually invoking the web of the HTTP server which is hosting that website. So majority of the time we are actually interacting with a web or a HTTP server there in the internet. And then there are also application servers which host dynamic data, or they can also host some APIs which fetch data from some backend. They can also in fact host some dynamic web pages. Apart from this web and the application servers, there are also other types of servers like FTP server, TCP server, etc. But those are something which we normally as developers do not develop. Okay, so what are the common types of web servers? Now that we have come to know that web servers are the most common type of software servers, let us try to understand web servers in more detail and let us try to know what are the most important web servers out there. So for production, we normally have Apache web server or Nginx. Apache is a more classic web server which has been there, I think, right from the dawn of the internet for more than 2 decades. And Nginx is a more modern version which supports a lot of concurrent requests. So that is why nowadays Nginx has become more popular than Apache web server. However, these are more for production use, so they require quite a bit of configuration. On the other hand, we can actually set up something very lightweight for local development. So Java or Python programming language, both of them ship a very simple web server which we can set up in our local development environment, which means our local laptop when we are doing the development. And once we are done, then we can actually deploy the website to a production grade web server which is Apache web server or Nginx. Apart from the J web server, which is a Java based web server, and the simple HTTP server, which is a Python based web server, we can also use a simple web server which we can download from the internet and we can use it for our local development. So in this video, I will show a demo of all these three so that you get a fair amount of understanding of how to start a web server and what basically happens when you start a web server. So here are the steps to start the web server. So basically you have to download the software. So it is about the simple web server, which is the one which is not shipped with Java or Python, but that's something which is available on the internet. You can download it from there and based on your OS, and then you can start the server. Now I will show you a quick demo of how that is done along with the Java based web server and the Python based web server. So this is my local system. I have downloaded the simple web server from the internet and it's up there, and I will start it with this command, and the starting command will differ from the operating system to operating system. So this brings up the panel from where I can actually configure my server and start them. So in fact, via the simple web server, I can actually have multiple servers running on my machine at different ports. So ports are basically the logical segregation via which the different servers can be segregated. So as you can see that each server can have a different home directory and then a different port. So let us start this server which will have the port, which will listen at port 8040, and this will be the home directory. So what it means is when the server will start, then if you navigate to that URL, then you can actually browse, then you can actually see this as the home directory. So let's see how that actually happens. So now the server is started. Now if I open a browser window and go to localhost 8040, what I see is a listing of that folder. So this is typically what a web server does by default. So what I can do is there are some test1.html, there are some like test1.html in that folder, so I can access that. And this is how actually we host any website or any static HTML page on a web server. And the process is similar here as well as similar also in Apache Nginx or in Apache web server or in Nginx. So this is about simple web server. We will now stop the simple web server and we'll start the Python based web server, which is easy. So this is the command to start the Python based web server. So it's basically python -m http.server 8040. So it is starting a HTTP server at port 8040, and the home directory will be the directory from where it is starting. And of course you can change the port. So maybe I just want to change the port to 8060. So it will start the Python server which will listen at port 8060, and the home directory will be the directory from where I start. See, I can now open another command prompt. So this server is now stopped. If I refresh it, I will get nothing because I already stopped the simple web server. Now let us go to 8060 because Python web server has started on port 8060, and I can see that at port 8060 only this folder, because this is the folder from where I started. So let me go back and stop this and let me start from my home directory. From this directory, if I start the Python server, then I can actually go and see the same folders. So the Python server again got started, and now the home directory will be different. So if I refresh here, I will see that same users /m Shromik as the home, and all the files and the folders of that folder will be listed here. So I can see the HTML also here. So this is also very similar to the previous web server, even simpler to start if you have Python installed in your machine. Now we will try to start the Java based web server that requires JDK version 18 upwards. So I already have JDK 18, so that is why I can just simply use the command jwebserver -p and then port. The port can be anything. Let me give the port 8020. So now the Java-based web server started at port 8020 and using the same folder from where I started the web server as the home directory. Now if I go back and refresh this, it will not show anything because I have stopped that Python-based web server. Now if I go to port 8020, then I can see that the Java-based web server again displaying the same set of files because I'm using that same directory to start my web server. And I can again, so this is how you can actually use either a Java-based web server or a Python-based web server or even the simple web server from the internet for your local development practices. Okay, so here is a typical scenario what happens in production. We have already seen that there are different kinds of servers, and out of those different kinds of servers, the two most important ones are the web server and the application server. The web server are the ones which host normally static pages, and the application servers are the one which normally host APIs or dynamic pages. So this is a typical production scenario. The client makes the request travels over the cloud, over the internet, and hits the web server, which is the entry point, and then the web server also does a bit of load balancing, because if there are too many users, then it has to take some amount of load, and then it has to distribute the load across multiple application servers, fetch the dynamic data from the application server, and return back to the client. So normally it can happen that the web server hosts the static page templates, and those templates can have placeholders there from where we will make API call to retrieve data from the application servers. And the application servers in turn will also invoke the database to fetch the data. So this is a very high level overview of what typically happens in production. You do not need to understand everything, but even if you get a high level overview at this point of time, it would be good for you. Okay, so now we have come to an end of this presentation, and I hope that you enjoyed it and that was useful to you. But I would sincerely request you to go ahead and try to start up one of the forms of the web servers in your local system, either a Java-based web server or a Python-based web server, or even if you do not have Java or Python installed, or if you are not comfortable with Java or Python yet, then you can actually download the simple web server and you can at least try to start that. Because coding is more about playing with your code, with your software around, and then you get more confidence. Yeah, so that's it. And I would request you to also subscribe to my channel and to like this video if you like this session. Thank you and bye-bye.